Okay, if you're ready, Chairman.
Yes, thank you.
Lovely.
Okay, thank you very much. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and any members of the public. Very pleased to welcome you to Policy and Resources Committee meeting, Monday, 2nd of November 2020. If everybody could actually mute, then that would be appreciated, please. This evening, we start on a rather sad note, just in case everyone doesn't know. Unfortunately, one of our standing councillors, Councillor Ron Pinnock, passed away very peacefully as it happened on Friday. So I think if we could have just a minute's silence in memory of Ron, and obviously not quite appropriate to stand, so everyone bowed their heads for a minute in memory of Ron, if you would, please. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of tributes to Ron in the near future. Move on now to the items on the agenda. And item number 1 is apologies for absence, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from councillors Roger Glitherow, Helen Harrison and Stephen North.
Anyone got any other apologies to report? Okay, thank you. Move on now to item 2, minutes of the meeting Policy and Resources held on the 7th of September 2020. Is everyone happy I signed these minutes as a true record of the meeting?
Quite happy, Chairman.
Everyone okay?
Yeah.
Anyone?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to item 3, any declarations of interest, please? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that when it comes to the public spaces protection order, I am a dog owner, whether it's relevant that I should declare that, and I walk obviously all around Thrapston.
So long as you're not a nuisance dog owner, you'll be all right.
I'm a responsible dog owner.
Hey, any other apologies, declarations? No, thank you. Move on to item 4, questions by members under Council Procedure Rule 10.3.
There are none, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much. Move over now to item 5, minutes of subcommittees and working parties. The first one is 5A, Finance and Performance Subcommittee on the 9th of September. In the absence of the Chairman, Councillor North, then since I'm Vice Chairman, I'll just briefly run through these. This was basically a one-item agenda and regarding the ICT Development Pool scheme, and it was the purchase for new money for a new server. Basically, the existing one is end of life at the end of the year, so a new storage server had to be purchased, and this it was resolved that that would go ahead, £45,000 to purchase it. And also to approve the transfer of the capital from the development pool into the ICT capital projects. So is everybody happy with that one? Since we can't see, Councillor Mercer, please. I can't see all the hands. So can you see all the hands, Louise?
No, you'll only be able to see 9 people. So
okay, in that case, if I don't see your hand, please just unmute and speak up, and we'll carry on that way. So Councillor Mercer, please.
Yeah, as someone who's been in the IT industry for 40 odd years, I can only say that that is a very high price to pay for that server. We are paying very high.
I can't comment on this. Glenn, can you like to comment on that at all? Or ICT seems to be expensive in my experience.
Well, in terms of the particular route that we've looked to procure this, you'll see that we've done it in accordance with our procurement rules. So we will be getting the best price that we can on it. I can ask for the comments of the IT services manager as to what is included as part of that price of the server, and report back to you if you wish, Councillor Mercer.
I would also be interested to know how widely the invitation to tender was distributed. In other words, what companies were made aware of the tender opportunity.
I can certainly include that in the response.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any more questions?
I think Councillor Farrell was waving.
No,
sorry.
no, Councillor Farrell wasn't waving.
Okay, thank you.
All right, okay. Right, we'll move on to item 5B now. It's a performance sub, which is on the 19th of October. And I'm referring to that paper. The first one was quarterly performance reporting, and it was resolved that the reports were noted. Second item was budget monitoring report to the 30th of June 2020. You'll see in 6.6 that the anticipated overspend after all the ins and outs was 376,000, which was really not bad at all considering the circumstances. Also draw your attention to item 6.11, where the subcommittee requested their thanks to Kevin Turner, Catherine Hayward and the finance team to be recorded for providing an excellent report during these unprecedented times. See there was 6 resolved items. Treasury management report is the next item, and this was again resolved that we noted the items. Debt write-offs. Sorry,
Dudley's waving at you.
right, sorry, Dudley. Councillor Hughes, please.
On the previous one you were just talking about, we had all this business about freedom leisure, but in fact, with the light of what's happening on Thursday, presumably there'll be a revised statement from them because they won't get any income.
I think the team that we mentioned in 6.11 will unfortunately be having to look at some revised figures.
I mean, you know, because we're now in a situation,
yes.
we took into account the income they had and the fact they hadn't got hardly anybody on furlough. Well, presumably in the light of Thursday, that situation will reverse.
Yes. Well, yes, there will be different figures. Yes.
So how will the figures be presented to us to approve? We have an emergency council meeting, an emergency, because we're talking probably another 100,000 or so.
Can I come in there, Chair?
Yes, well,
yes,
in terms of does the latest lockdown position change things? Yes, it certainly does with the leisure centres closing again, and the leisure officer who works for the council has a meeting with Freedom Leisure tomorrow in order to find out what the latest position is of that, and also as part of that on the agenda to be discussed are the finances as well. What we'll do is understand what the position is. I would imagine that's going to take a little while for Freedom to work that through. And once we understand what that position is, if we do need to bring something further back to council, then we will do.
There's a lot of information from the last time when we had the lockdown, so you know, they won't be starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So are you happy with that, Councillor Hughes?
Yeah, I'm happy. I wonder what the process is going to be once it comes back to council. Will we have to have a special council meeting to approve if the money is a significant amount?
We haven't taken a decision on that yet. We did discuss it this morning, and really it's going to depend upon the information that comes back from Freedom Leisure. And the other thing that will affect it is if we all believe it's 1 month or more than 1 month for the lockdown. So I think until we've got something that is sensible and concrete to come back with, then we'll hold off. But we will come back as soon as is sensible.
Okay.
I think it's true to say that the previous time things happened really very quickly.
Exactly.
From the finance department, and Joe Bailey has presented some very good reports from Freedom Leisure regarding the situation, and I'm sure that will happen again this time.
You have
So,
Councillor Mercer.
Yeah, and
Sorry.
Andy's waving at you, Richard.
Yeah, sorry, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. When this came to full council, I pointed out that I thought these were optimistic figures, and the assumption there wouldn't be a lockdown was even more optimistic. Can I suggest that when this comes back again, there are several scenarios presented so that we can see what happens if the lockdown ends on the 3rd of December, what if it lasts an extra 2 weeks, what if it lasts till middle of January, etc. So we have a range of pieces of information indicating what the different options are in the different situations. In particular, we should look at what happens if we switch from a lockdown to back to the tiered system, and some speculation by the officers as to what the different implications are. So we know what the various options are, and we don't have to try and change things again at quite late. If you like, we've already done the work previously.
Yes, I'm pretty certain that, Glenn, that will be the situation, in fact, won't it?
Those points are very much noted. In terms of the report that council saw previously, they did include a range of figures based on the level of take-up that we would see of returning members. And what we do need to do as part of this latest position is compare where Freedom think their finances are now compared to where they were when we had that previous council meeting, which was only it wasn't that many weeks ago. We'll assess the financial position, and if we do need to bring something back in advance of the council that's planned in January, we will do.
Yeah, what I'm suggesting though is that when you do bring something back, you should give some indication of what the implications of different lockdown scenarios would be, so that we've got some idea of what happens in any particular situation. Because, being blunt, we can lobby MPs, for instance, if things look particularly difficult in a particular scenario for us.
I think that, to be fair to our finance team, that's exactly what they did last time round, and I'm sure they'll continue to do the same this time round.
Yes, Councillor Jennings just taking the words out of my mouth on that one. I think you'll find, Andy, that Councillor Mercer, that the information you're looking at will be covered. And let's face it, this has only just happened, so you don't expect to have figures ready this evening. The finance department's good, but they're not that good.
No, I was merely asking the question, Chairman, what the process was going to be for authorising a considerable sum of money. So.
I did actually predict it at the last council meeting, so it's not a complete surprise.
Okay, we'll move on now to the next item. If you're all happy with the debt write-offs, which are very small.
Yeah.
We'll move on now to the economic recovery prospectus, and you've actually all been sent out the revised prospectus.
Yeah.
And you'll see there we have a result to recommend to P&R for a resolution to go to council. With 2 items: to note the progress to date on the economic recovery prospectus phase 1, and to approve the economic recovery prospectus phase 2 and associated work streams as in appendix 1.
Yeah.
So any questions on these before I propose them? Councillor Hughes.
Yes, I noticed on 1.2 the penultimate comment, it says working with town councils. What does that mean? Giving town councils money? Does town council have any money for me and see so far?
I believe a small amount of money has gone in the town council directions.
Yes.
With there's been assistance with signs, etc. So that's already happened, yes. And I think it also means, of course, in economic development in general, as opposed to just giving money. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we have some sort of indication of what the timescales for this is? Because when we're talking about opening the high street safely, we were anticipating 2 weeks ago that that would be in the next week or two. Now we're looking at probably just before or just after Christmas. Will that funding still be available at those times, or is it time limited?
I think what we found the last time this happened is that there are various funding streams came down from the government, and you know, in view of the fact that this has only just been announced, there's no funding stream yet been identified, I believe. Glenn, is that correct?
Well, there was funding streams that were announced last week as part of the three-tier lockdown or three-tier process in terms of dealing with COVID. We're expecting some further announcements during the course of this week in relation to the full lockdown, which comes in on Thursday.
Can I request then that the details of that, in particular the timescales, be supplied to members, because with some of these funding streams you have to apply at a particular time or you don't get a chance of getting awarded anything. And if it's working through the town with the town councils, we need to pass that information to our colleagues in the town councils for them to be able to apply at the right times.
Exactly.
I wouldn't expect that the town councils would be particularly active in this. I would take you back to clause 6.11, which is where they were extremely quick at getting the information to the government. Very large amounts of figures were put to the government regarding the financial situation, and I think we maximised the funds that we could possibly get, and I'm sure that'll happen again.
Chairman, can I come in?
Yes, please.
Councillor Peacock. Yeah. Yeah, no, just to say that during this process, the first lockdown, we have had support from ENC. There's weekly meetings held with the clerks. So funding is, we are aware of what funding there is, and that has been supporting with signage and various other things as well. So at the moment, we do have a good communication system with the clerks. So I'm hoping that will continue going forward, because that has been invaluable. I don't know if any other members can concur with that.
Yes, we're getting some nods.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Any more questions on this before I move to the resolution? Okay. Well, I just read out the resolutions a few moments ago. Do I have a seconder for this these resolutions, please?
Yeah, quite happy, Chairman.
Councillor Jenny, thank you. Any amendments to the resolutions? All those in favour?
Aye.
Is anyone against? Thank you, that's carried. So the next item is financial support by Freedom Leisure, which has already been dealt as a council item, so that's been covered. And the last item then was an asset management update. And there are actually 6 resolved items there. Has anyone got any questions on those? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll move on to item 5C, Personnel and Subcommittee meeting on the 14th of September. Councillor Gutherow is not here tonight, so Councillor Peacock will handle the next 2 sets of minutes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Minutes from the 14th of September, then personnel sub. First 5 items really matter of report. The main item on the agenda for that one was setting up an appeals panel. We had a presentation from the monitoring officer, and it was resolved that the appeals panel, members appeal panel should be set up, and that 3 councillors be appointed, with the leader of the council to inform the monitoring officer of the councillors to be involved as soon as possible. But as Councillor North's not here, I'm not sure whether that's been done yet. That hasn't been reported back to me yet.
I can confirm that has been done.
Okay, do we know they are?
I don't know who all 3 are. I know who 1 is.
Right.
I better not say for the time being.
Okay, right.
Can I?
Okay, any questions on that, Councillor Mercer?
Appeals against what?
This is something that is sub judice.
that?
It's an appeal against a complaint that has been made that was heard by a panel, and the panel's decision is being questioned.
Okay, what I meant was, is it an appeal against something involving an officer, a member, the council as a body, or what?
I'm not going into that, Andy, at this stage.
Okay.
Oh, goodness me.
Any other queries on that? Thank you, Councillor Farrow. You're not actually muted.
Oh,
I'm not muted. Can I
Councillor
say,
Hughes?
when we set up these panels, I hope we get councillors who have experience of doing that kind of thing. That's to say, councillors who have experience of personnel and appeals and so on, not just people who happen to be chosen for a variety of other reasons, which is often the case.
No, Councillor Hughes, that was a specific reason why the appointments weren't made there and then. The leader went away to appoint so that we got the right people for the job with the right qualifications.
Good. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Pigott. Would you like to move on to the next one then, please?
Okay, the next one was on Monday the 26th of October. That was subcommittee. We had a good presentation from Samantha Dickinson from HR of all our data from our workforce statistics, which now includes Wellingborough and Corby Borough Council. Quite difficult under these times with people working from home and things. Some areas that we thought were of a concern, basically at the end of the day were not, because they probably just related to odd appointments, and due to COVID, certain things hadn't been able to be carried out, like employment checks and references and things like that. So it's at the end of the day, it was the report was received without any questions altogether. And just to say, really, our sickness absence was very good as well. So difficult to monitor, I know, but they are being monitored whether they're working at home or actually in the offices. So, but we were very low on that as well. So that was good. Okay, and then the next item was a delegated decision, really, and that was resolved. We noted the report on that. That was done through 3 delegated decisions by the Chief Executive. Then we had an urgent item regarding resourcing of Environmental Service Health and Protection team, and that was resolved to approve the resource proposals as stated in the section 3 of the report we received. That for this and any further COVID specific resourcing, delegated powers were given to the Chief Executive or nominee in consultation with the Head of Environmental Services or nominee and the Chair or Vice Chair of Personnel Sub to use surge enforcement grant funding to meet the needs of the service. And then finally we had a slight amendment that we purchased a body camera equipment for the Environment Services team. This will be funded by the surge enforcement grant. We had one occasion recently with the licensing application where things had probably needed a bit more support when it went to an appeal. So we've asked one of these to be purchased for the protection of officers and the public. And that was the end of the meeting, Chairman.
Any queries on those, please? No. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Peacock. We now move on to agenda item 6, Public Spaces Protection Order Update 2020. And I'd like to call on Charlotte to present this paper, but just a couple of points before we go. There is no page 54, so don't search for it. And page 54 has got a slight error where a couple of lines have been missed out, which I can give you those later. And Appendix 1 is pages 31 to 52, and Appendix 2 is page 53, and that's relevant in the recommendation because Appendix 2 is not actually marked on the pages. So, but it's page 53, so there are a couple of minor things there. So I'll hand over to Charlotte now, please.
Good evening, councillors. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, excellent. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have before you the report related to the Public Spaces Protection Order update. This report just summarises the work we've done. Some of you will remember in 2017 we did the first set of Public Spaces Protection Orders, and this is just a refresh of those existing orders. The way the legislation works, it does require us to basically recheck that they are still relevant and appropriate. So this piece of work follows a public survey to sort of go back and double check that we've got the right spaces and the right things on those spaces, and to just make sure that there weren't any others that parish councils or town councils wanted us to consider. And as you can see from the report, actually the survey public support the continuation of them pretty much as is, both in the locations and in the nature of them. As council has alluded to, the list of the actual spaces is contained in the second appendix, appendix 2, and I have attached the summary of the actual survey for your information as well at appendix 1. So sections 4 through to 12, I think, are the standard implication items, and section 13 contains the recommendations. Just getting down to it, which is just to consider and approve the publication of the dog-related public spaces protection orders as listed in appendix 2. Now happy to take any questions.
I'll just clarify one point, Charlotte. In 1.1 in the background, the third bullet point is all outdoor enclosed children's play areas in the county. Should that be district?
It should be, yes, councillor, yes.
Okay, I didn't think we were that wide.
No, not that.
Not yet, anyway.
Not yet. No,
Yes, there's a lot of interesting information contained in this document. I think it'd be well worthwhile passing it down to some of the parish councils and so on. But Councillor Boto, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I be heard now?
Yes, you're fine.
Thank you. Just a quick comment on this very interesting document regarding dog fouling. We have pages and pages of it. I do note we've got remarks like the whole of rules, the whole of thraps, and the whole of Highland Ferrers, and the whole of everywhere else. I mean, is there any way of, which seems to be a bit of a lazy way of answering a question, and I don't know about the rest of the towns, but I can assure members that the whole of rules is not affected by dog fouling. Can we get any of this dragged out to a bit more meaningful in terms of, I mean, where there's a specific location, fair enough, but I think this description of the whole area being a problem is a bit rich, to say the least. Thank you.
Charlotte,
Okay.
would you like to comment on that?
Yes, of course. Yeah. So we did ask in the detail in sort of the comment section where people sort of were giving us a general area if they could be more specific, and we have sort of gone through all of that line by line to identify anywhere that's a hot spot or is anywhere that sort of correlates with complaints that we've had. Then there were one or two that were already on our radar, but by and large, it's this real kind of public perception of it's everywhere, it's awful, but actually where is it? And then it's very difficult to pinpoint. One of the things that we've sort of learned from this is actually we probably need to do more about the positive side. Is actually it is quite clean. So we're going to try sort of getting a bit more of the sort of images and social media out there with the patrols that say, look, actually we've been today and we've not seen anything. So and also we do try and sort of clean up, but this is one of the reasons why we went back out to survey, was that there is this perception year on year when we do the resident survey that it's a problem, and it really always scores really highly, but it is always very difficult to pinpoint to the street location or whatever, because it seems a bit of a perception thing. So yes, in short, absolutely where we had it, we've absolutely used that intelligence, but it isn't necessarily as forthcoming as we might have hoped.
I think the comment is that with a survey like this, you've got the extremists. Oh, right.
That's a fiver in the kitty.
Sorry about that. Well, the last time that happened, it was ENC ringing to say the live stream had gone down. So I don't know what that was, but anyway, with anything like this, you've got extremists. One hand is dog haters and the other end is dog lovers. And of course, knowing what happened in Hall Park, where we've actually created a large dog off the lead area, then you can see from the comments from about Rushton that you've got the extremists. And what you've got to do is to take the extremists off and take the bit in the middle, or the large bit in the middle. I think when you read through these items, you'll take off the "it's everywhere" syndromes. So, Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, please. And I've then got Val Carter, Councillor Val Carter next.
And David James.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, on page 35, could the K be taken out of Aldwinkle? It's the specific areas with dog fouling. Later on, it's spelt correctly. It's just there's a random K in there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I didn't notice that. Councillor Carter, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, like Rawns and everywhere else, we've got a massive problem according to the public. Our perception is a bit different, but yeah, obviously I accept there are certain areas. The only thing I'd say, obviously around the lakes, that land is private land once you go over the bridge, and there's not a lot we can do about it. I don't know how you stand on that, Charlotte. I don't know.
You're right, and actually that was one of the areas that did sort of feature as a specific. Now, with some of the other powers that we have with in the same act, actually, some of the antisocial powers, there is potential to sort of work with the landowner a bit more. Against one of those, we'd kind of if there was ever a place to demonstrate that it was really causing a problem, that's probably one of the ones where we've had the most complaints. But we would prefer to try and sort of work with first, and then sort of fall back on that if we weren't getting any traction. But yeah, that was actually one of the areas that we will be sort of focusing a bit more time and attention on. Again, current situation notwithstanding, as soon as we're able.
If I could just come back on that, and obviously with that one, it's the accessibility, isn't it? It's all very well saying they want bins further around the lake. I don't know how they think the bin men are going to empty them, sort of fishing them out with a rod or something. It's the accessibility to a bin. And iSlip do not possess a dog bin. They were going to site one at the end near the main, what's the road called, Mill Lane, and down there, but the owner of a house nearby obviously objected, and so there is no dog bin in iSlip, and then as far as I'm aware there never has been. Can you just clarify, sorry Mr. Chairman, when it says about the play areas and fenced, so like the Peace Park, for example, we have a dogs on leads on our signage there, because obviously, as you can appreciate, Charlotte, it's people come down from the estate to town through the park, and it's used by lots and lots of families, and in the main, but yeah, I accept there is a problem, but it was the definition of fence, because it's fenced on two sides now, but not on the steps. So I don't know if we come under that or not.
No. Play area. That's really about the locations with sort of children's play equipment, things like that, where they are sort of fully fenced, and there's an absolute demarcation of users' spaces. So yeah, the Peace Park is a dogs on leads, so we can have both types of users in the same space as long as the dog is under control.
Okay. And sorry.
Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. My concern is the designated play areas for children with play equipment where dogs are not supposed to be present, but there are a certain subset of dog leaders who seem to ignore that rule. And I'm aware of children who are terrified of dogs and who now won't go into the play areas because there are dogs there. Are we going to do any serious enforcement of this? Because it's a lot worse than just having dogs fouling the pavement. Children can be traumatised by it. I know children who run back home scared because of it. So I would like to see some serious enforcement, and the people who willfully ignore the signs saying no dogs, fine them, and fine them a lot.
If I can just reassure you there, Councillor Mercer, alongside the work this sort of side of the work that we do. We are actually doing quite a lot of work with what we'll call antisocial dogs or dog owners. We've got sort of several ongoing cases at the moment. So what I would urge you to do, because with those it's very much a case by case, we'd need specifics. If there's been individuals that are feeling that way, please urge them to get in touch, because there is stuff we can do, but we kind of need to identify the individuals. And obviously, you know, it's a bit more of an investigation. But yeah, please urge anyone feeling that way to get in touch. We absolutely do take that seriously, and there is enforcement available, and we do take it.
Thank you very much. We've lost the chair.
Apologies about that. Well, no, we've now lost the phone. Sorry about that.
Chairman, I think I have my hand up. I'm not sure if you can
I
see.
yes, I've got yes, there's Councillor Jenny. That was down as well.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. When I started reading this paper, I expected to read about dogs. I also expected to read about drugs and drink. Drugs and drink haven't been dealt with. Can I assume that there is going to be another paper coming forward on public space protection orders for those two subjects?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why that hasn't been tackled in this, is that has been traditionally covered by my community safety colleagues. So while there is a bit of a natural overlap, they tend to do humans and I tend to do the animal side, has sort of been the natural split. It is something that we sort of flagged up with those colleagues and sort of said that, again, part of the future North Hants should be to then consider what other things might need to be done as part of that process under the regulatory framework. So it's on our radar again, but yeah. And again, I think it's one of those things, had there been a specific and social behaviour order or issue that had been flagged with us, we may well have considered doing something to, you know, address an actual need. But, you know, right at this point in time, there isn't anything certainly that I'm aware of that would lend itself to that approach.
Well, I'm conscious that there are certain areas that need to be dealt with as far as drugs are concerned and as far as drink is concerned, and obviously we're not dealing with that. So could you just put a quiet word into your colleagues who deal with human livestock, I suppose?
Yeah, absolutely.
and suggest that we'll be on that case.
Yeah, I've got Councillor David Brackenbury and then Councillor Dudley Hughes. So Councillor David Brackenbury first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this is a very interesting document, and certainly if you read all the representations that have been made, it doesn't put our district in a particularly favourable light. But I guess, but of course, you know, it seems that we are picking at human beings, and I won't disturb you about the human beings too much, but obviously drink and drugs and motorbikes I see a lot. The one thing which I do commend, which is interesting and is animal, is the issue of cats. Now, I'm well aware that it is much less easy to police cats, many of which seem to zoom around large distances all by themselves for days and days on end. But cat fouling is a problem as well as dog fouling. And in the happy event that we can ever identify anything, it would certainly be worth handling in the same way that you do with dog fouling, and perhaps the paperwork might reflect that. Thank you.
My comment on that, being an expert on the subject with my neighbours, is that it's much more discreet than dogs. And I suggest you maintain a high level of clay on your property, and that will let the problem go elsewhere. Councillor Hughes, please.
Yeah, this is very interesting, but my concern is how you contacted the respondents, because from my ward, there's one person from Great Addington, one person from Little Addington, and 3 from Woodford, from the whole ward. I don't know what was used to contact these people. There's one person in Bringsted who moans about the whole place being covered in dog fouling, but they were the only one person who actually answered the. So was the survey sent out
electronically?
No,
Was it done through the parish magazines? Was it done through the ward members? How was it done?
So we did a member briefing, so that went out to all members at the start of the survey. All of the locations had signage at them, so again, those walkers that actually use the spaces would have hopefully seen those signs and been made aware that way. We obviously used social media. The officers themselves were sort of talking, and we made sure that the town and parish clerks had an email about it as well. So given that we were sort of again in that sort of COVID period, and you know there was sort of an awful lot going on, we sort of did it as widely as we could. So yeah, I think I think number of responses, there was sort of certainly several hundred, and for this kind of thing, that's a relatively good number. It tends to be one of those ones again that, as we said before, when you have a strong opinion one way or another, you'll respond. But if you're sort of in the middle, actually, you know these things sort of run by. So you know we do keep alive to those. You know, as I said, you know, we were obviously talking to residents all the time. So if there was any sort of strong views that we didn't feel were reflected, I'd be sort of making sure to certainly be bringing them to attention and to perhaps tweak the approach. But you know, as I said, we've tried to do the approach based on the balanced view of all the responses we've had.
Well, I think perhaps we could have asked the parish councils, at least have got everybody on the parish council to have answered this thing, because there's more than one person on Great Ellington, more than one person, there's certainly more than 3 people on Woodford, and of the 24 people on Rutland, certainly the town council was never asked as a town council individually. Councillors asked to respond.
Councillors are totally biased anyway, so you wouldn't be able to ask them. And I think the point that Charlotte made,
I don't agree with that. So.
Is very valid. That you know, a questionnaire like this does beg the negative responses, but you'll see that number 22 is keep up the good work, ENDC. We shall miss you. So there is a positive one. So maybe you know there can be positive items in a further survey. I'll come back briefly to Councillor Carter, who's already had 2 bites at the cherry.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, it was just in the actual Appendix 2, the public spaces protection orders. In fact, it lists the Spinney in Warwick Gardens, and I'm just wondering why.
That has been on the list for about 6 years. So again, in terms of locations, it's been a layover from sort of, you know, the last few years of sort of how we've done this. So specifically why that one's there, you know, beyond that, I can certainly look into a bit more about the history of that one and whether it needs to be. That one is under, I'm just looking, that's under Dogs on Leads, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just, to be honest, nobody goes in there other than to dump their garden rubbish or chop down trees.
Yeah, I'll be curious to know the history, Councillor Carter, as to how that arrived on the list in the first place.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no more questions, everyone's disappeared off my screen now.
Yes, just as I started this one, I'd like to finish it, please. Would I suggest for future surveys, albeit not with this authority, but a new one, that when we ask these questions, we do actually say that we're looking for specific examples, not general comments, because this comment of the whole of a village or a town is ridiculous. A good one is if you can locate sites, put a bin there because it's a justified complaint, fine. But I think these otherwise these generic comments are really quite superfluous.
I think you'll find it will be impossible with the general public to eliminate that sort of comment.
Well, we can try.
Okay, well, I've got 6 people now.
Chair.
Yes, sorry.
Sorry, can I just come back? Just in response to what Councillor Carter said regarding the Spinney in Warwick Gardens. I know there are dog owners in Warwick Gardens, and I'm not aware if they do use the Spinney, but you know, it obviously doesn't need to be many. It only needs to be one person that lets their dog foul in any particular area or use it. It is near the road as well, so that might be why there's concerns with dogs on leads, because it is adjacent to the road. The A605.
Okay. Thank you very much for those comments then. I really enjoy talking about dogs. So I'd like to move on now to the recommendations in 13.1. Consider the quality implications relating to this report as set out in section 3 above. And secondly, to consider and approve the publication of the dog-related public space protection orders as listed in Appendix 2, and I've added page 53 to accord with legislation. Do I have a proposer for those recommendations? Love to speak up. Councillor Brackenbury, thank you. And the seconder?
Seconded.
Councillor Farrar, thank you very much. Any amendments? All those in favour?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Anyone against? Okay, thank you very much. I think that report is well worth circulating around a few more councils as well, because it's got some interesting stuff, or very interesting stuff.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So we now move on to item 7, which is Homelessness Prevention Grants 2021 to 2022. So I'll call on Carol to present this one, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report seeks approval for an in-principle extension to the Homelessness Prevention Grant arrangements. As members are aware, East Northampton Council has for a number of years allocated homelessness prevention grants to organisations operating locally to prevent and relieve homelessness. These grants have been really successful in providing good value for money solutions to help the council deliver its homelessness duties. So as we move towards the unitary authority, we need to consider how to continue to support these organisations and ensure that their work in partnership with the council continues into the new authority. The table at 2.3 of the report itemises how the grants were allocated for 2020 to 21, a total of £49,985, which was £991 above the budget in the MTFS, because some of the underspend from previous years was added to that budget. So these grant agreements terminate on the 31st of March, and if the grant funding doesn't continue in 21-22, then these organisations may no longer be able to provide the services that we rely on. None of the other existing North Northamptonshire councils provides homelessness prevention grant funding in this way. And this is because each of the councils has different local circumstances and so has different arrangements in place for homelessness prevention. At East Northamptonshire, we're more rural than the other councils. We've therefore got fewer homelessness services. We don't have our own housing stock that we can use like Corby and Kettering do. And nor do we have a sort of hotel and bed and breakfast provision and a private rented sector in the same way that Wellingborough does. So without these additional local services, our statutory homelessness duties would be considerably more difficult to discharge locally. These organisations were already struggling due to a combination of factors such as recent reductions in public health funding, the whole COVID circumstances and increased measures that they've had to take to ensure that they can operate in COVID safe environments, and also rising staff costs that they've had due to a decrease in volunteers as a result of the pandemic. So all these factors combined with uncertainties about local government reorganisation will affect their finances in the future and put them at an increased risk of failure. They need to have some certainty going forward so that they can continue to provide their services and to plan for those services going into 21-22. So they need that certainty to be given to them in good time so that they can plan and make sure that they keep staff in place. The night shelter, as you're aware, had to close during the lockdown as they couldn't operate safely due to a combination of the fact they had shared accommodation and also a lack of volunteers. It's hoped the night shelter will shortly be reopening in the new premises at Duck Street, where they'll be providing single bedrooms. To facilitate this, Policy and Resources Committee agreed on the 7th of September to provide additional funding from the Homelessness Prevention Grant Fund to help them reopen in those new premises. But in order to move forward with this, East Northampton Community Services really needs some assurance that they will continue to receive homelessness prevention grant funding in 2021-22. Work is ongoing across North Northants to shape what the long-term arrangements for homelessness might look like across the new unitary, including a review of the North Northamptonshire homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. But meanwhile, it's important that our local services remain in place so that they can contribute to those developing accommodation pathways for homeless people. So the funded organisations need to have that certainty, but it's also an opportunity to keep those services in the district during the next financial year while those new arrangements are put in place, and also so that the new authority can benefit from those services being available. So the committee is asked to consider approving an in-principle extension to the homelessness prevention grant budget for 21-22, with a recommendation to the North Northamptonshire Shadow Authority that the required funding based on the current level of 48,994 is included in the draft North Northants Council 2021 budget. It's proposed that bids for that funding should be restricted to the current recipients only, and the Homelessness Prevention Grants Panel would sit to consider those bids and make recommendation to this committee in January 2021 regarding allocation of that funding. And this would in turn allow time for the Shadow Executive to endorse this approach and for the organisations to be given notice of available funding so that they can continue past vesting day. An initial equalities impact assessment is attached at Appendix 1. There's only been neutral or positive impacts have been identified. A health impact assessment is also set out at Appendix 2. The organisations supported make important contributions to people's health and well-being. The council has statutory duties in respect of the prevention and relief of homelessness, and there is a risk that homelessness will increase in the district, and the council will have to pay additional costs associated with that risk, particularly given the increased pressures of COVID-19. And these proposals are intended to help mitigate that risk. So provisions exist within our current approved budget for all the grants covered in this report. And the proposals that members are being asked to consider and approve require the North Northants Shadow Authority to make the decisions for the new North Northants Council. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 13(1) of the report, and they are to consider the equalities impact assessment, approve an in-principle extension to our current homelessness prevention grant funding for the organisations set out in this report, and to make a recommendation to the North Northants Shadow Authority that the financial provisions to cover the funding are included in the 2021-22 draft budget for the new North Northamptonshire Council. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Right, thank you very much, Carol. I mean, this is quite a difficult one, of course, with the end of the East Northants, so we're trying to make provisions going into the next year. So since I can only see 4 people now, if you'd like to speak, can you
Councillor Jenny, Councillor Brackenbury, Councillor Jenny and Councillor Brackenbury so far.
Right. Thank you very much. In that case, I'll call on Councillor Brackenbury, not knowing which one it is.
D. Wendy, you wanted to speak as well, did you?
No, I don't, but hopefully, Chair, you'll soon.
Ah,
okay. Councillor David Brackenbury, then, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That was confusing. Yeah, well, thank you very much for a very comprehensive report, Carol. And I mean, I agree with all the recommendations. The only point the only query I've got really is you say that the funding is allocated within our budget, which is fine, understood, but beyond vesting day, it isn't. It would be an executive decision to be made by the new authority. Is that not correct?
Yes, that's right. It's really though about getting an in principle agreement, which I understand committee made a similar in principle agreement in relation to the community support grants. So that yes, the ultimate decision is for the new Northants authority. But this is about this committee making a recommendation to the shadow executive for that funding to be included in the budget going forward.
Okay, well, thank you very much. That clears that up. And yep, I agree with the recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor David Jenny, please.
Order, Chairman. Can I ask a quick question? Since all the people who are voting here are also members of the Shadow Authority, and the Shadow Authority is the body that has to approve the budget that we're talking about, don't we all have a conflict of interest?
Well, wait for the Chief Executive to make a comment on that, please.
Okay, well, the short answer is, as I'm sure the monitoring officer would tell you if he or she, the deputy, was on the call, is that it's up to every member to decide for themselves whether they've got a conflict of interest. But I would say that if anything, you can only have a personal interest because clearly you don't have a prejudicial interest. And also the time to consider whether you've got an interest or not is not now. It's when it gets to making a decision about whether the funding is allocated in the shadow executive meeting. And the other thing is, I believe it's the shadow executive that probably proposes the budget, but when it gets to the shadow authority in full, then members need to take a view then about whether they've got a conflict of interest at that point rather than now.
Yeah, this is in principle.
That's a lawyer's answer.
That will have to suffice for now.
Well,
Councillor David Jenny, please.
I'm only a qualified accountant. I'm not a qualified lawyer, so
It's the way
you're not making the decision now.
The chief executive and the accountant, not the lawyer. Carol, if I hadn't known better, I'd have thought this was a report that's been prepared by a county council officer. The situation, as I understand it, and David Brackenbury's just been there, because it's within our current budgeting, and because all of our current budgeting is being used to formulate the unitary draft budget, then by implication it's already there. Now, I know the subject has already been brought up, and certainly Glenn Hammonds has been supporting this. There is no way whatsoever that a commitment can be given until after the budget setting. So I'm afraid until probably February, you can't have an answer.
Yes, but this is
have an implication,
in principle. This is in principle.
Yes.
And a recommendation too, which is all we can do. What we want to try to do is to safeguard the funding for these organisations in the forthcoming year. And if we do nothing, we will not in any way safeguard them.
That's the recommendation, which is absolutely totally fine. But what Carol was actually asking for in her report was a bit more than that, and that
but Carol has read out the recommendation, which is quite clear and in principle. Yes, Carol would like us to agree to the funding tonight. I had Councillor Wendy Brackenbury, I think, raised her hand and disappeared. Is that correct, Wendy?
Oh, sorry, Chair. You've said what I was going to say. We are being asked to agree in principle.
Okay. Do I have anyone else wishing to speak, please? No. In that case, then I'll move to the recommendation.
Can I add something, Chair?
Yes.
Just in terms of, I say, there are protocols in place for contracts essentially being taken out or being procured in advance of the new authority coming into being, and those provisions would need to be followed, those protocols. So one of the bits can be done this is in addition to the recommendations in the report. I think the recommendations in the report are fine. They're not committing anybody to anything. But if that we do want to go ahead and for next financial year procure those organisations to deliver those services, then we need to follow the protocols that are in place with Northamptonshire Shadow Authority to make those happen, and they can be done through that route.
That's better. That's
I mean, I believe when the last one came up of this nature, then Ben Smith said that that would be processed through that route.
Yes.
So if we
I'm
pass,
saying the same, yeah.
Yeah. So if we approve these recommendations, that is what will actually happen then with Ben Smith. Okay. So
Yeah.
I'm not going to read the recommendations again. There are 3 of them. Do I have a proposer, please, for the recommendations?
Propose.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you very much. Any amendments to the proposals? In that case, all those in favour, please speak.
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? No. Thank you very much then. So those motions are carried. That is the last item on the agenda. Apologies for my telephone ringing. I shall try and get rid of it the next time. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending this evening and the interesting discussions. And I wish you all a safe journey home. And I hereby declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night,
Bye.
everyone.
Good night.
All right, everybody.
Right.